In this episode, I'll be chiming in on spirit guides, or at least my perception of them. I'll also be talking about patron deities and spirit animals.
Tell me if this rings a bell. I often hear like super spiritual people, like the very psychic people that we all know, talking about spirit guides, their spirit guides, your spirit guides. Sometimes they sound like invisible friends with rather ordinary names, like my spirit guide Bob, my spirit guide Madeline. Or a spirit guide might be an angel, some sort of a land spirit or deity, or a god or a goddess from well known mythology. Maybe it's an ascended master or someone who once was human and a very famous human who is now a spirit that is, well, guiding you. Siddhartha is a popular spirit guide. Joseph Campbell, John Dee, an emperor from the Qin dynasty, all popular spirit guides, it seems. Personally, I've never been able to perceive spirit guides in this like invisible human form, like this person that only you can see, who you envision as having red hair, blue eyes, wings, or maybe no wings, a blue dress, or maybe pants, or your spirit guides look exactly like the historic painting of Ganesh, or look exactly like the Chinese cultural renderings of Kuan Yin. What a coincidence. I've, again, personally never had that type of a manifested perception. So at first, when I hear people express their spirit guides, I was convinced either A, spirit guides aren't a thing, it's not real, or B, I'm not cool enough to see spirit guides. And then I remember a conversation I once had with this psychic nun. At the time, I thought she was nuts, and I was a little bit suspicious that maybe she might be schizophrenic. She was saying that she heard voices. She was saying that she was talking to the voices of me, but they were not me, but they were. And I remember thinking, fucking hell, Buddhists and Taoists with their fortune cookie wisdom and vague explaining, you know what I'm saying? The mountain is not tall, the valley is not low, the bird has no wings, the ocean is dry, the desert is flooded, the thunder without lightning. Another time, this psychic nun said something to me to the effect of, Kuan Yin is speaking through you, and there is a voice I hear right now. It is Kuan Yin, and she is with you. She is you. You are Kuan Yin, yet you are not Kuan Yin. And I was like, oh boy, here we go again. Can't you just tell me yes or no? Am I going to make it into law school? That had been my question, and she was talking about Kuan Yin. Okay, back on point. Now I think I'm at a point where I've cobbled together a hypothesis that I kind of like, an explanation for spirit guides that also reconciles the voices that the psychic nun made reference to, or at least I think that this is starting to make sense to me. Yes, spirit guides are real, they're a thing, but subjective perceptions may vary. You know how some people name their prized possessions like they personify their car? Hi, meet Betty. Betty is a Ferrari, and this Ferrari named Betty has like this totally comprehensive personality and persona. Betty is angry. Betty is happy. Betty likes it when I do this. Betty hates it when I do that. But Betty is a car. By the way, I am totally not making fun. When I used to play the violin routinely every day, during everyday practice, my violin's name was Darian, and during performances, concerts, important auditions, or recitals, my violin's name was Tuxedo Mask. If you've ever watched Sailor Moon or you're a Sailor Moon fan, then you know exactly what my violin's personality is like, and the persona when my violin was practicing, and the persona of my violin when it was in performance mode. I think it would be ignorant to dismiss and mock people who do this or see this form of vivid imagination as silly. That externalized personification augments a particular personal power of yours. It helps you to rise to the occasion in a sense. It can help you be a more empathetic, even empathic person, more conscientious. And when you're all of that, you're able to raise your personal performance abilities. If we consider Kuan Yin as an archetypal energy, an essence that does exist independently outside of us, but simultaneously is also within us, that dichotomy of outer alchemy versus inner alchemy, then there is a part of every one of us that embodies Kuan Yin, that Kuan Yin archetype, but it's more prominent in some and it's going to be latent and almost irrelevant in others. Also, maybe even during certain stages of your life, a particular god or goddess archetypal energy is stronger or weaker in you, more resonant or less resonant. And there's a karmic purpose for that. When it becomes more resonant during a period of your life, it's so that activated archetypal energy can help you perform better, it can help you rise to a certain occasion. By the way, I'm not saying that patron deities are per se the same as spirit guides. I think there's a pretty important distinction between the two. And they're worth distinguishing. But right now, my thinking and expressions are a bit messy, and I'm kind of muddling them together because I'm still trying to make my way through these ideas. I'm just kind of throwing everything against the conceptual wall and seeing what's going to stick together and what doesn't. Okay, so I think right now, who I am before you, this consciousness that you're perceiving, is a solution, a mixture of many different archetypes, all blended into one unique form, and that form is me. Yeah, I'm a unique snowflake. When I'm not feeling balanced, or when I need to extract certain information that I already possess but I can't consciously find, kind of the way you always lose your keys in your own house, you know the answer to the question you've asked but just can't seem to find it in the hot mess that is your brain. So when I'm trying to figure out what's going on with myself, or as a professional reader, what's going on with my client right now, the perception of a spirit guide is identifying that facet of you that's most prominent, most relevant, or where the key is, where the answer lies. Your spirit guides are telling me can be translated to something like your car keys are on the dining room table, you dumbass. And maybe you're so familiar with your own house that you only see what you presume is there or not there. So you can't see the car keys on your dining room table no matter how many times you stare at your dining room table, because in your mind you presume that the keys are not there, because in your mind you know that the keys are not supposed to be there. So you can't see it, subjective perception. But since I don't live in your house and I'm just visiting, for example, I don't have presumptions. So I can better, more objectively see the keys on your table. Does that make sense? Sort of? The statement, Bob is one of your spirit guides, means that there is this essential nature in you, something that's you but very different from the character you're projecting openly at this time. And this essential nature that can be perceived as Bob, which we are isolating out of you and observing intently in a way that's external from you, because that's what will most empower you and most safeguard you, most ensure your survival, most ensure your heightened success. Now, getting into the woo, Bob can be an ancestor and therefore something in your cellular memory passed down through the metaphysical component of your DNA. Or Bob can be a divine archetype that you embody more so than most people. It's a divine archetype you're most resonant with. It can also represent the part of you that, if you activate, does empower you to a greater resonance with divinity. So, from a psychological standpoint, if that makes you feel more comfortable, a patron deity is a facet of your higher self. And when you can connect and embody, invoke, or evoke that facet of your higher self, you further empower yourself. The part that I think gets a bit hard to conceptualize, and it may take some thinking about it a couple of different times before you can start to wrap your mind around it, is that your spirit guide, let's say Bob, is both an objective reality and a subjective reality. But you can only access, communicate with, and connect with Bob through your subjective reality. Your perception of Bob empowers you, feeds you with the answers and insights you need, and you need to have that connection. When you don't isolate Bob out of your combined mixture of an identity, you're not able to access or tap into Bob. So you have to sort of, for a moment, extract Bob from the solution or mixture that is your distinct personality and focus on Bob and externalize or project Bob out. And in that sort of separate entity, you can then summon up Bob, that inner facet of yourself that's going to get the job done, that is going to be what you need to ensure your success. God, I really hope I'm making sense. So if I'm chiming in here, you most certainly have spirit guides. They're real and they are around you and within you. spirit guides are a matter of both outer alchemy and inner alchemy, and both forms of personal alchemical development help you to access those spirit guides. But how you can communicate with them, how you can access insights through your spirit guides will depend on you, because it's entirely based on how you process information and your perception abilities. So you might not be able to just read an article written by some commercialized, overhyped psychic medium who is giving you the top 10 tips for talking to your spirit guides or identifying them. Follow these 10 tips and expect it to just happen for you. See, it depends. I just don't think it works that simply. It depends on your physiology and how your mind works. It depends on how far along you are in your own personal development. I think certain constitutions of the mind are more conducive for externalizing and personifying spirit guides as full-blown characters, the invisible friends. So modalities of outer alchemy will be more constructive. Other constitutions of the mind would not be able to find such an exercise to be productive, and they wouldn't be able to consider it credible for them. And so perhaps modalities of inner alchemy, where you learn to see areas of your inner self, where if an archetype is superimposed over that area of your inner self through the lens or framework of that superimposed archetype, you can almost see that piece of yourself more clearly. Please tell me I'm making sense. I perceive spirit guides as both a comprehensive entity beyond me and yet still an inner facet of me. The reason I am able to make contact with the entity beyond me is exactly because there is a part of me inside that is perfectly resonant with that external entity. We're all connected to each other by an intricate tapestry of chords, and a spirit guide is one of the more beneficent chords we can focus in on. Through this chord, this spirit guide, a form of non-physical communion can happen. In other words, that spirit guide, that chord in the tapestry that we're connected to, helps us to transmit messages and information and data and feelings back and forth between us and some collective. Okay, so let's talk about non-deity or non-divine forms of spirit guides. At different times of our lives, I think spirit guides can often appear in the form of particular ancestors, deceased relatives who both once upon a time actually existed external and beyond you, but also now exist internally within you, linked through your DNA. I think spirit animals represent an essential nature within you that's more primal, more animalistic, which is best expressed by that particular animal as we've observed it in nature. And it's that specific primal animalistic instinct and even intuition in you that can optimize your performance levels. When you see that actual animal or images of that animal in your environment, it's triggering that internal primal essential nature and helping you to realize that internal primal essential nature. For example, say the primal essential nature of the owl is a primal essential nature that's strong in me, very strong. And when I tap into that primal essential nature likened to the owl, I perform better. I am more empowered. But maybe at this moment, I don't realize it's the owl yet. So what happens? Whenever I see owls or images of owls, something from the subconscious gets triggered. I feel closely identified to the owl and my observations of the owl, and eventually, if I'm open to it, I realize the primal nature in me that can best help me become empowered is in line with the owl. So then I might say something to the effect of my spirit animal is the owl. Omens are just triggers that help us to activate latent parts within ourselves. That's why we often say spirit guides communicate with us through signs and omens, because they do. For those of you who've accessed other work I've put out there, then you already know that I express a duality of my primal essential nature through the owl and the swan. So I might say that my spirit animals are the owl and the swan. It may sound hokey and new agey to some of you when I talk about so-called spirit animals, but it's just a term of convenience. What I'm really referring to is my core primal essential nature, which can be likened to an essential nature we observe in the owl and the swan. I believe spirit guides are both objectively real and subjective perceptions. Some energy or force we don't fully understand yet exists out there, and it's there, but you can only understand and strike resonance with that unseen, unseeable energy when you perceive it subjectively. It's your perception and your projections that activate your access to that external energy, your ability to wield that energy in a way that's powerful and constructive for you hinges on your subjective perception. Listening to your spirit guides is one way of expressing the notion of listening to your higher intelligence and intuitive intelligence that goes beyond rational knowing.
Okay, now that you've heard my perspective on spirit guides, patron deities, and spirit animals, it's time to consider yours. How do you perceive spirit guides? Do you believe such a thing even exists? Who are your spirit guides? What are your thoughts on the matter? Chime in and contribute to the body of knowledge out there for others who are looking for resources on spirit guides, patron deities, and their spirit animals.